"Oh, are you so blind," she cried, "as to not see what this means? Can you not understand? Do you not know your worst enemy?" "My worst enemy?" I echoed amazedly. "You surprise me, Mavis. What have I, or my enemies or friends, to do with my wife's last confession?" She raved between poison and passion. She could not tell, as you could see by her final words, whether she was dead or alive, and her writing at all under such stress of circumstances was a phenomenal effort. But it's nothing to do with me personally. "For God's sakes, do not be so hard-hearted," said Mavis passionately. "To me these last words of Sybil's, poor, tortured, miserable girl, are beyond all expression horrible and appalling. Do you mean to tell me you have no belief in a future life?" "None," I answered with conviction. "Then this is nothing to you? This solemn assurance of hers that she is not dead, but living again, living too, in indescribable misery? You do not believe it?" "Does anyone believe the ravings of the dying?" I answered. "She was, as I have said, suffering the torments of poison and passion, and in those torments wrote as one tormented." "Is it impossible to convince you of the truth?" asked Mavis solemnly. "Are you so diseased in your spiritual perceptions as not to know beyond a doubt that this world is but the shadow of the other worlds awaiting us? I assure you, as I live, you will have that terrible knowledge forced upon you some day. I am aware of your theories. Your wife had the same beliefs, or rather non-beliefs, as yourself. Yet she had been convinced at the last. I shall not attempt to argue with you. At this, if this last letter of the unhappy girl you wed cannot open your eyes to the eternal facts you choose to ignore, nothing will ever help you. You are in the power of your enemy." "Of whom are you speaking, Mavis?" I asked, astonished, observing that she stood like one suddenly appalled in a dream, her eyes fixed musingly on vacancy, and her lips trembling apart. Your enemy," she repeated with energy. "It seems to me as if his shadow stood near you now. Listen to this voice from the dead, Sybil's voice. What does she say? 'O God, have mercy. I know who claims my worship now, and drags me into yonder rolling world of flame. His name is—'" "Well," I interrupted eagerly. "She breaks off there. "His name is Lucio Romanes," said Mavis in a thrilling tone. "I do not know from whence he came, but I take God to witness my belief that he is a worker of evil, a fiend in beautiful human shape, a destroyer and a corrupter. The curse of him fell on Sybil the moment she met him. The same curse rests on you. Leave him if you are wise. Take your chance of escape while it remains to you, and never let him see your face again." She spoke with a kind of breathless haste, as though impelled by a force not her own. I stared at her amazed, and in a manner irritated. "Such course of action would be impossible to me, Mavis," I said somewhat coldly. "The Prince Romanes is my best friend. No man ever had a better, and his loyalty to me has been put to a severe test under which most men would have failed. I have not told you all." And I related in a few words the scene I had witnessed between my wife and Lucio in the music gallery at Willowsmere. She listened, but with an evident effort, and, pushing back her clustering hair from her brows, she sighed heavily. "I am sorry, but it does not alter my conviction," she said. "I look upon your best friend as your worst foe, and I feel you do not realize the awful calamity of your wife's death in its true aspect. Will you forgive me if I ask you to leave me now? Lady Sybil's letter has affected me terribly. I feel I cannot speak about it any more. I wish I had not read it." She broke off with a little half-suppressed sob. I saw she was unnerved, and taking the manuscript from her hand, I said, half banteringly, You cannot then suggest an epitaph for my wife's monument?" She turned upon me with a grand gesture of reproach. "Yes, I can," she replied in a low, indignant voice. "Inscribe it as, 'From a pitiless hand to a broken heart.' That will suit the dead girl, and you, the living man." Her rustling gown swept across my feet. She passed me and was gone. Stupefied by her sudden anger and equally sudden departure, I stood inert. The St. Bernard rose from the hearthrug and glowered at me suspiciously, evidently wishing me to take my leave. Pallas Athena stared, as usual, through me and beyond me in a boundless scorn. All the various objects in this quiet study seemed silently to eject me as an undesired occupant. I looked round it once longingly, as a tired outcast may look on a peaceful garden, and wish in vain to enter. How like her sex she is, after all, I said half aloud. She blames me for being pitiless, and forgets that Sybil was the sinner, not I. No matter how guilty a woman may be, she generally manages to secure a certain amount of sympathy. A man is always left out in the cold. A shuddering sense of loneliness oppressed me as my eyes wandered round the restful room. The odor of lilies was in the air, exhaled, so I fancied, from the delicate and dainty personality of Mavis herself. If I had only known her first, and loved her, I murmured, as I turned away at last and left the house. But then I remembered I had hated her before I ever met her, and not only had I hated her, but I had vilified and misrepresented her work with a scurrilous pen under the shield of anonymity and out of sheer malice, thus giving her in the public sight the greatest proof of her own genius a gifted woman can ever win: man's envy. End of chapter 38 of The Sorrows of Satan.